Hey folks, Jeff here at Back to Country. Well, I'm still stuck in the city, but that doesn't mean I don't have things to do. I always make sure I bring plenty of projects back with me so I can still get things done that make progress towards the end goal. And of course, that end goal is getting to the homestead full time. So today I'm working on the generator, one of the generators. If you've been following along, you know that last trip I was out there for about 2 months, just a little over, and I was running generators about 16 hours a day, some days a little less, but usually 12 to 16 hours a day. And I had several generators that didn't make it. they broke for one reason or another. So one of them was one of my small champion generators, and this generator has really been a great generator, runs great, no issues, but the rope on the recoil broke, and this recoil isn't really designed for maintenance, so this bolt does not come out. What it did was it causes this little metal deal where the threads are at to just spin in there. So I drilled this out, took it apart, tried to fix it, but it just didn't work out. That's real tight now, and the spring just doesn't catch. Don't really know what happened to it. Probably when the rope broke, it spun and the spring came loose, and who knows what. But anyway, it was only about 20 bucks for a new one, so we ordered a new one, and now we've got to put it back on. Unfortunately, I've got to do it all by memory. And you know, one thing I noticed about getting older is sometimes I suffer from that CRS, can't remember stuff. Just leave it at that. Anyway, so I got all these parts. I got that box with bolts and pieces in it, and so let's see if my memory serves me well enough to get this thing back together, because I did disconnect a bunch of wires and everything. Of course, if I can't figure it out, I do have the manual. Maybe that'll help. Best I can recall, I've got to put the recoil back on. Then I've got to put the this is the main control unit with the inverter and everything built in it. Bolt that back on, plug everything back in, plug this stuff up here back in, and then I think we can put the casing and everything back together and the fuel tank back on and all that. So I kind of remember, but let's see how it goes. Alright, so the first thing I did is just preparation. I went through all my little nuts and bolts, kind of separated them out to the same types, and then I tried to remember where each of them go. So I remember these go to all the outside ones. There's 3 on each side that bolt the case back together. These, I believe, were random case bolts. These 2, I'm not really sure. I don't recall what these 2 are for yet, but it'll come to me when I get there. This was for the recoil cover. This is one of the pieces that goes on the case. These 3 nuts are for the recoil, and these 2 are for the control unit. So I think I remember all my nuts and bolts. So next step will be to put the recoil back on. Alright, so I remember the reason I took this thing apart in the first place was to be able to access the front of this so I could get the recoil on and off. And so that's what I did there, is move everything out of the way, and now I'm gonna try to make sure that I line this recoil up correctly so that I can get it back together. But in order to do that, I need to remember how the side panels go. Okay, so this side panel goes on this side, which means the recoil has to face over here. So, little analysis, we figure that out, no problem. And I'm pretty confident that's how that goes. And I remember this little wire holder was on the top, holding some wires. So I'll make sure and put that back on as well. Guess it would help if I had a socket ready. I think that was 8mm. Okay, get all these started just by hand. And then we'll tighten them up. Okay, that's back on, and okay, it pulls and we get it to grab. I don't want to turn it over, even though none of this is hooked up. Who knows if it would start or not. I wouldn't want to take a chance. Next thing we're going to do is put the control unit back in place. See, this has a little rubber piece down in here that fits onto this bottom peg. And we do have a few wires to reconnect. Hopefully we can do that with it in place. Tighten those up and we're good. Okay, so one thing we need to do now is try to remember where all this stuff goes. This could be a bit challenging. So I've got one 4-prong wire there. And there's a 4-prong plug here, so that's probably good. This one has a bunch inside of it, so Okay, here's a bunch of wires too. Okay, so this has 6 plugs. One of them's a blank, but I did see a 6 plug. I think this one over here is a 6 plug. So I think that goes back in there. And it fits. Chances are we got that one right. Fits there. So what I'm doing here, I'm just looking for wires that aren't connected. Since that's blue and blue, single prong, I'm gonna gamble those two go together. Okay, this one is a single. Yep, it's yellow on both ends. And it really can't reach a whole lot of other ones because this one's got a unique shape. It's got to go there. Okay. Now this is a floating ground wire, and it was loose when I opened it, but I'm sure it's supposed to be connected somewhere, so my guess is that it was part of the case. Two pronger. That's a 5 prong. So this goes to the bottom of the control. Here's a 2 prong. Okay, those go together. So I should have taken pictures of all this before I took this dang thing apart. That would have been a lot easier than having to analyze all this and guess where stuff goes. So far everything seems to be color coded, so say odds are pretty good that I'm guessing correctly. See where that wire harness was clean, which means it was in there. Appears I got everything connected. I don't see any loose wires except this ground. That one I'm really not too sure about. I imagine it was supposed to be connected somewhere, but there's not a lot of places it can reach. Not too sure about that. May need to take a look at the book or something and see if there's any reference at all to it, because there's just not a lot of places that it will reach. Yep, I'm gonna have to do some research on that. I've got everything else that I can see. I don't see any other loose wires or anything, so it would appear I've got everything else connected and it's ready to start putting the case back together. But before I do that, I'd really like to figure out where this ground wire is supposed to go, because I know it's the floating ground, and it probably is connected to this deal here that you connect to the ground on the front of the deal. But if it's not connected anywhere, then that seems kind of useless. So I've got to investigate that further and figure out where it goes. Otherwise I'll lose sleep at night wondering. Stick with me. Alright, so I looked in the book and the wiring diagram shows the floating ground green and yellow wire as being grounded to the control unit. But I looked all over the control unit and there's no obvious place to connect it. So my assumption was that it connects right here on this bolt. And maybe they just forgot to hook it up at the factory. But that seems just a little bit tighter than what I thought it should be. So I took my other one and opened it up. I have another generator just like this, and it was actually bolted right here. You can see this is threaded. Unfortunately, I don't have the little bolt. So I tipped the case over and everything to see if it had just come off and was in the bottom of the case, and all I got from that is a bunch of dirt, no bolt. So I'm guessing that that's like something they forgot to hook up. Somebody failed that test at the factory and they missed that one. So what I'm gonna do is probably just connect it down here, because I don't have another nut to go in there, another bolt, and it's metric. I don't have a lot of metric ones laying around, and I don't really feel like going to the store and getting one. So when this is back in place, you can see it fits tight enough that this wire is loose enough. It's not going to be a problem. So it'll still be grounded to the control unit, just like the book says, and how the other one is. Just instead of connecting up here, we'll connect it down here. But in the end, it achieves the same thing. So that's what we're doing. Alright, so we're just going to tighten that nut back up. That'll secure the ground wire as well as the control unit, and we're good to go. Since I already dumped all the dirt out of this, the next thing we got to do is put the fuel tank back on and then get all the case back on. So the fuel tank came in this part of the case, and it connects up to the fuel valve here. Not too difficult to replace. Just gotta slide it back on, and then it's got a pinch type connector to hold it. Okay, so we got it slid over. Of course, I didn't bring a pair of pliers, so I'm just gonna see if I can do it by hand. It's just a real small and the answer is no, so I've got to get a pair of pliers to do that. Okay, I got a little pair of needle nose pliers, and just gonna squeeze that clip, slide it back into position. But man, it does not want to fit over. There it goes. It just wanted to fight a little bit, but we got it. Okay, so we'll see if we can bolt this back on, get it into position, and that takes 3 of these 10mm bolts. We're just gonna screw them on hand tight to begin with, mainly just to hold this side of the case in place. Those are all in hand tight. And we'll go ahead and throw 3 screws into this side of the front cover. What I do need to figure out is where that other Tenderman clip goes. So we've got this Tenderman clip, that's what those are called, Tenderman clips. And I don't know where it came from. Got one there. Got 4 on the case. Those were all there. Right there. That's where it goes. Alright, so we figured out that puzzle. Put that back where it belongs. Now the challenge is getting this other side of the case on, because these two pieces have to line up to the case, fit into slots. So if you can see, you got a slot there and a slot there, and those pieces have to line up and go into it. So let's see if we can get that on correctly. In the meantime, I'll feed this recoil through. Seems to have lined up properly. So get a couple screws in the top here to hold it in place. Now normally I would use the little battery powered impact to do all this, but alignment is kind of important when you're putting this thing back together, getting it all lined up and stuff, so that's why I'm doing it by hand. That way I can do it slowly, hold pieces, make adjustments as I put it back together. Bottom screws in. Again, you got to line all these plastic pieces up, so I'm just moving them by hand as I put screws in and trying to get everything aligned. So that doesn't seem to fit perfect. We'll see if we can adjust it as we put screws in it. Here's the screws actually pull everything in, make it fit better. Still don't like the alignment. It's not perfect. Gets my OCD going. Clip fell off again. Okay. Normally these clips will hold themselves on. Maybe this one's bent a little bit, so I'm gonna tighten it up a little bit by squeezing it with the needle nose pliers there. Oh, that's good. Dropped it. Of course, now that I squeezed it tight, it'll be harder to get on. There we go. And that won't fall off anymore. So before I put this back cover back on, I'm going to pull off the spark arrestor here and clean it. Because part of your normal maintenance is cleaning this thing. And we can see that it needs cleaned because the screen is practically plugged. So what I'm going to do is just take a wire brush to this and clean it off. So I'll be back in a second. Alright, so you can hopefully see now that's clean. You can see through it, see daylight. So all I do is just take the wire brush, brush it off, blow it, clean that end as well. And when you can see that it's clean, you're good to go. And then we put it back on. Okay, now this thing goes back into place. Put the little screw back in it to hold it. Alright, so it's not lining up correctly. There we go. Give it a little push to get that plastic piece in all the way so our screw will line up. I was hoping that I could just put the screw in and it would suck it down, but it wouldn't line up, so gave it a little push with the butt of the screwdriver, and that's good to go. Let's see. Put this piece back on. It appears to line up pretty well. Okay, so I just made a discovery. I didn't pay attention when I put this thing back together. I thought all these, I knew where all the screw pieces went on, but there were these two that were different. So now I got it just about put back together, and I got those two different ones still sitting there. And I know they don't go in this end because it has all matching screws. So that means I did something wrong. And I just figured out what it was. So no big deal, easy to go back and fix. Just got to pull out two screws that I put in the wrong place. And that's these screws in the handle. Had to be the different ones. Because these screws have this little lip right here that I know goes into these ends. And these two screws that I wasn't sure where they went, they've got little washers. So that's the difference. So the screws with the little washers go in the handle. And they fit just fine, so we figured out that puzzle. Again, if you don't want to have to analyze everything as you're putting it back together, good idea is always to take pictures, write things down, whatever. When you take it apart, notice the differences so that you know where it goes when you put it back together. Okay, so we have got it all back together except the main access panel that goes over on this side. I'm gonna check the oil real quick. Looks good. Pop that back in. It's got these two screws that just hold it. Now I don't think it'll start because I did drain all the fuel out of it, but I am going to give it a couple quick pulls just to make sure everything's the way it should be. Pull the choke, turn it on, and let's just see what happens. No fuel, but everything sounds like it should and pulls like it should, so all we'll have to do is fuel that up and we're done. All right, folks, so that was a nice little project we had on our to-do list, and we got her done. She's all ready to go back to work. The good news was the only thing that happened was the recoil cord broke. It was running great when it happened. We were just trying to start it back up after it ran out of gas, and it broke, and that put it out of commission because we were unable to fix the one on it and had to come back and order parts. Sometimes that's the way it goes. The good news is we got the part, we got it back together, and she's ready to go back to work. So hope this is useful to somebody. But as always, we do appreciate you watching, and we hope we'll see you on the next one. Thanks.